The most powerful woman in the city walked into my cafe on a wet Tuesday morning to collect the child who had just climbed into my lap and called me mama, and stopped dead in the doorway when she saw whose lap it was. Raina Voss, the coldest alpha the corporate world had ever made, the woman whose tower threw its shadow over my little cafe 3 blocks away, came through my door at a half run with her coat still on, and her security 2 steps behind her, chasing a 3-year-old who had slipped a nanny's hand and bolted across a rain-slick street into the one shop in the city she should never have entered. And she found that runaway child of hers, wrapped around the neck of a barista her own mother had paid 4 years ago, to disappear before anyone could prove the baby was mine. The whole cafe went silent. The child in my arms had her face buried in my collar and would not let go.
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel!
And Raina Voss, who had not looked at me in 4 years, because she believed to her bones that I had taken her mother's money and abandoned the both of them, looked at the gray eyes I was holding against my chest, her gray eyes, our gray eyes, and went the color of someone watching the floor of the world drop away. I'm going to tell you how a woman who pulls espresso in a 12-seat cafe ended up holding the secret heir of the Voss empire in front of the woman who runs it, and being claimed, with the child everyone had sworn was an orphan, by the coldest alpha in the city. But you have to let me go back, because nothing about that morning makes sense until you understand the 4 years I spent believing my daughter was dead, and the one autumn before that when I was very briefly the most alive I have ever been. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. My name is Edie Calloway, and I read the cup. Not fortunes, not the leaves, the cup. The real thing, the coffee in it and the hands that made it both. The truth of a blend and the cheap lie someone has cut it with. Put a cup in front of me at a dark counter, and I can read, somewhere behind my sternum in a place that has no name, the truth of it. Where the beans grew, the year, the hand that pulled it wrong, the supermarket robusta hiding under a label that says single origin. I own a small cafe called the Copper Cup, which is a polite way of saying I am the woman behind the counter that the people in the glass towers never think about. The one who makes the warm thing in their hands on the way to the cold rooms, where they decide everything. Most people who do my work do it with a good palate and a steady hand and a patient back. And they do it beautifully, and the cups go out across the counter, and no one remembers the woman who made them. I did all of that too. But I also did the other thing, the thing I have never once been able to write on a menu. The thing that made me, by 25, quietly the only person on my block who always knew which roaster was lying. I can hold a cup to the light and tell you the espresso has been cut with something trucked in from a factory. I can breathe in a pour-over and feel that it is a tired commodity bean dressed up in a rare name. I do not know how else to say it, so it does not sound like a parlor trick, and it is not one. Coffee keeps what is done to it. People forget that. My grandmother is the reason I can do it, and she is the reason you are going to believe the rest. So let me set her down properly. Nan raised me. My mother was a name on the back of a photograph and nothing more, and she had spent 50 years behind counters in this city, a server and then a roaster's hand in rooms that never once put her name on the door. 50 years of being the woman who made the warm thing that no one remembered making. And somewhere in those 50 years of holding other people's mornings in her 2 hands, she learned to read what a coffee had been made of, which estate bag was a cheap blend, which famous roast had been stretched with something the label would never name, which proud single origin was not the origin at all. She had a small brass coffee scoop, the handle gone soft and warm from 50 years in her apron pocket. And the first true memory I have of being myself is her folding my 2 small fingers around that scoop and teaching me the only thing I have ever really believed. A cup doesn't lie about whose hands warmed it, Edie, she would say, with my nose at the rim and the steam on my face. People will lie to your face your whole life, but the thing in the cup passed through somebody's hands to get to you. And the coffee can't lie. She made it ordinary, the way I could taste a thing and know it. You just feel for what it's been made of, child. Most folk are too busy reading the label to taste the cup. And I understand now that the ordinariness was the kindest, most protective thing she could have done. Because she had seen what powerful people do to a poor woman who is gifted out loud. Nan died the winter I turned 23 and left me the brass scoop and a little money and a lease on a dead storefront 3 blocks from the Voss Tower. And I poured every cent and every hour I had into the copper cup. And for 1 year, I was just a woman building a small good thing in the shadow of a very large one. I did not know, when I signed that lease, that I had set my whole life down at the foot of the family that would take everything from me, and then 4 years later, hand a piece of it back through my own front door at a dead run. Her name was Raina Voss, the only daughter of the family in the tower, 29 that autumn to my 24, already being shaped by her mother into the cold thing the city would later be afraid of. You have to understand what she was, even then, because the woman who froze in my doorway 4 years later was carved out of the same stone. When Raina Voss came into a room, the other alphas measured themselves against her and lost. She had her mother's blue-black hair, so dark it drank the light, and the palest gray eyes I have ever seen on a living person, and she spoke in short, complete sentences, and never once, in all the time I knew her, raised her voice. She had a single tell, and I am the one who found it, the way you find the one warm spot in a cold wall, a heavy steel watch on her left wrist. And when something moved in her that she did not intend to show, her thumb would press once against the face of it, hard enough to whiten, and then let go. That was all. That was the whole of what Raina Voss would give you. I learned that autumn to read that watch the way I read a cup, and I am telling you about it now because it is going to come back in my own cafe at the worst and best moment of my life, and I want you to already know what it means when her thumb finds that watch. It was not small talk. Nothing she did was small talk. I told her the truth, which is that the lot she'd just drunk was mislabeled, and I'd bought it cheap from a broker who didn't know what he had, an Ethiopian heirloom in a commodity sack, and that I'd known it from the first cup. So I did. I made her 3 cups blind and read each one out to her, the origin, the year, the lie, and the one I'd cut on purpose to test her. And at the end, she set down her cup and pressed her thumb to her watch, once and let go. That was the autumn. I'm not going to pretend it was slow or careful because it was not. It was 24 and 29 in a cafe after closing, and a gift that someone finally wanted instead of overlooking. She came in when she did not need coffee. She brought me lying bottles of wine and tired bags of beans for the pleasure of watching me find the lie. She learned the shape of my hands behind the counter, and I learned the tell of her watch. And somewhere in the middle of one wet autumn, the heir of the Voss Empire and the barista in the shadow of her tower fell into the kind of love that the people upstairs are never, ever allowed to keep. She told me once, at 2 a.m, with the chairs up on the tables, that she had spent her whole life being told that wanting was weakness, and that she had not known until me what it was to want a thing and not be ashamed. I believed her. God help me. I believed her all the way down. I want to be fair to her, even now, even after everything, because the woman who broke my life was 29, and being broken herself in a colder house than mine. Raina's mother was Cornelia Voss, the chairman of the family, and I had never once stood in a room with her, but I had grown up on stories of her the way other children grow up on weather. Cornelia Voss had built the tower out of other people's debts and called it vision. Cornelia Voss had not lost a thing she wanted in 40 years, and her daughter, the cold, pale heir, had fallen in love with a barista. And worse, by the end of that autumn, was carrying a barista's secret like a lit match in a dry house. Because by the time the leaves were down, I knew, and Raina knew, that I was pregnant. We were happy about it. That is the part I have to make you believe, because everything after is built on a lie about exactly this. We were terrified and young and happy, and Raina held my face in both hands in the dark of my closed cafe and said, "I will tell my mother. I will handle it." And I believed her. She had never once lied to me, and the thing between us by then was not a fling I could have walked away from if I'd wanted to. I want to give you one night of that autumn fully, because you have to understand what was real before you can understand what was stolen. It was the night I first read her, really read her, the way I read a cup. We were closing the cafe late, and she was sitting on the counter where customers are never allowed to sit, and I made her the last pour of a lot I'd been saving, and she drank it and went quiet, and I said, because by then I could not help saying true things to her, "You think you have to be cold or you'll be eaten. Your mother taught you that." And the coldest alpha in the city set down her cup and looked at me for a long time, and her thumb went to her watch and pressed, and for the first time did not let go, and she said, very low, "Nobody has ever read me before. Everybody reads the watch and the name and the tower," and that was the night it stopped being autumn and started being the rest of my life, except that someone in a tower had already decided how long the rest of my life would be allowed to last. I did not yet understand that the most dangerous lie in any family is the one a mother tells while she is smiling. Raina went up the tower to tell Cornelia Voss that she was going to keep the barista and the baby both. And I never saw Raina again, not for 4 years, not until she froze in my doorway chasing a child I had been told was dead. Here is what I knew at the time, which was almost nothing, and that was the whole design of it. I went into labor early and alone in a clinic across the city because Raina had stopped answering, and there were complications. And I went under, and when I came up out of the dark, there was a kind administrator at the foot of my bed with a folder, and a sympathy that I would spend 4 years learning to hate. The baby had not made it, she said. There had been nothing anyone could do. And there was a letter, for me, in Raina's hand, the slope of it, the words only she used, saying that she was sorry, that her mother had shown her what I'd taken, that she could not be with a woman who had accepted a settlement to keep quiet, that it was better this way. A check was folded inside it. I did not cash the check. I have never in my life cashed that check. But I read the letter, and I believed it because it was in her hand, and I had just lost everything. And grief makes you believe the cruelest available thing. I want to stop here for one breath because this is the wound the whole rest of it turns on, and I need you to feel the exact shape of it. 2 people who loved each other were each handed, by the same smiling woman, a perfect forged proof that the other had done the unforgivable. I was given a dead baby, and a letter that said Raina had thrown me away for money I'd supposedly taken. Raina, I would learn 4 years later in my own cafe, was given a living baby and a letter that said I had taken a settlement and walked out of the hospital and signed the child away, that I had never wanted either of them, that I had run. Neither of us had done any of it. The baby lived. I was told she died. Raina was told I left. And it worked, all of it, because Cornelia Voss did not forge a stranger. She forged us, in our own handwriting, around the one thing we would both have died to protect. So I buried a child who was not in the small box, and I did not know it, and I grieved her for 4 years. I want to tell you I fell apart, and I did for a while, in the back room of the cafe with the lights off. But Nan had put something in me that does not fall apart all the way, and the cafe was the only thing I had left that was mine. And so I got up every morning before the sun, and I made the warm thing for other people's mornings, and I read their lying cups, and I did not say the name Voss out loud. I told myself the work was enough. I told myself I had had one autumn of being fully alive, and that some people do not get even that. I got very good at looking like a woman who had made her peace with the worst thing that had ever happened to her. I had not, I had only learned to pull a clean shot with my hands shaking. Now I have to bring the child into it because she is the engine of everything. And she came into my cafe on a wet Tuesday 4 years later at a dead run, the way the truest things always arrive. Too fast to stop. I did not know her. How could I? I had been told she was ashes. She was 3.5, and she had slipped her nanny's hand on the rain-slick sidewalk and seen, through my fogged window, a woman behind a warm counter. And something in her, too young to have words for it, had thrown her whole small body across a dangerous street and through my door and into the room before anyone could catch her. She was crying. She had dark hair and a face I did not yet let myself recognize. And she came around the end of my counter as if she had done it 1,000 times. And she lifted both arms to me, and she said the word that stopped my heart in my chest. I want to be honest about what happened in me, because it was not recognition, not at first. It was something older than recognition, something in the body. I went down on my knees behind the counter without deciding to, and I caught her, and the second she was against me, the weight of her, the smell of her hair, the particular gray of the eyes that came up to find mine, every cell I had stood up at once and screamed a thing my mind was 4 years too trained to refuse. I did not understand it. I only knew that a strange child had run into my cafe and called me her mother, and that my arms had closed around her as if they had been empty and waiting for exactly her shape for 4 years, which I would understand in about 90 more seconds they had. She pressed her wet face into my collar and held on with both fists, and she would not let go. And I knelt there on the rubber mat holding a stranger's child and shaking like a leaf. And then the bell over my door went off like an alarm, and the most powerful woman in the city came through it at a half run with her coat still on. Raina Voss stopped 3 feet inside my cafe, and the world stopped with her. I watched it happen on her face in stages, the way you watch a building come down. First, the relief of a mother who has found a bolted child, her eyes going to the small dark head against my chest, her body already moving to collect her. Then the half-second hitch as she registered whose cafe, whose counter, whose apron. Then her eyes came up to my face, and 4 years fell on her all at once, and the cold, pale air of the Voss Empire made a sound I had never heard her make, low and broken, and her thumb went to her watch and pressed, and did not let go. "Edie," she said, just my name, as if it were the only word left in any language. I did not understand yet. That is the cruelest part of the whole morning, and I have to make you sit in it the way I had to. I thought, God help me, I thought she had a child, that she had married and built a family in the 4 years since she'd thrown me away, that this beautiful gray-eyed girl was hers and some other woman's, and that the universe had arranged the one joke cruel enough to finish me, to put Raina Voss's daughter in my arms calling me mama. I held the child tighter, and I stood up and I said, in a voice I did not recognize, "Come get your daughter then. She's confused." And Raina Voss looked at me holding that child, and she said the sentence that took the floor out from under both of us. "Edie, she isn't confused. She's 3.5. She was born the 7th of November. I am going to tell you what it is to have 4 years of grief turn over in your chest in a single second, because I lived it standing up behind my own counter. The 7th of November. I knew that date the way you know your own pulse. I had grieved it 4 times. The child in my arms went still, sensing the air change the way children do, and looked up at me with Raina's eyes. And I looked at Raina across 12 feet of my little cafe, and the two of us understood at the exact same instant, with no words for it yet, that we had each been buried alive in a separate lie for 4 years by the same pair of hands. "They told me she died," I said. "It came out of me in pieces. They told me, there was a letter in your hand. You took a settlement." And Raina Voss said, very quietly, into the silence of a cafe full of strangers who had all stopped breathing, "There was a letter in your hand too." Neither of us moved for a long moment. We could not. There was a 3-year-old between us who was the proof of everything, and who only knew that the nice lady who smelled right was holding her, and that her other mama had come. And she looked back and forth between us with Raina's gray eyes, and she said, in the way of small children who break you without trying, Mama. And I realized I was. And I realized Raina was the coldest woman in the city, standing in a 12-seat cafe with her thumb white on her watch and tears on her face. 4 years of forged grief coming down all at once. "What's her name?" I asked. It was the only thing I could get out. And then, after a moment, the thing that ended me. "I named her after your grandmother's cafe. You told me about it once. The one she always meant to open. I didn't know why I did it. I have to slow down and tell you about those 4 years from her side, because she told me all of it later, and you cannot understand the claiming until you understand what had been done to her too. Raina had gone up the tower that autumn to tell her mother she was keeping me and the baby. And Cornelia Voss had not raised her voice. She never raised her voice. She had simply, over the following weeks, built a world. She told Raina the labor had gone wrong, that I had survived but the child had not. And then, a week later, that there had been no child at all the way Raina thought, that I had taken a settlement before the birth, signed an agreement and gone, and that the baby Cornelia was now, conveniently, raising out of family duty, was the result of a private arrangement Raina was too compromised to be told the truth about. She fed it to her daughter in pieces, each one crueler and more confusing than the last, until Raina did not know which lie she was grieving, only that I was gone, and a child existed and her mother held all the strings. And Raina, the cold pale air, had done the one thing that saved all 3 of us in the end. She had kept the baby. She did not believe she was the father in the way that mattered. She had been told a story designed to make her feel she had no claim. But she had looked at that gray-eyed newborn her mother handed her as a family obligation. And something in her that her mother had never managed to freeze had refused to let the child be raised by anyone else. She had taken Pippa into her own house against Cornelia's wishes. She had hired her own people. She had moved her offices 18 months ago to a tower 3 blocks from a cafe she had never once let herself walk back into. And she had told herself it was a property decision. She had named the baby after my dead grandmother's dream and told herself it meant nothing. The body knows what the mind has been forced to forget. Raina had been circling me for 4 years without letting herself understand why. And her daughter, our daughter, had finally just run the last 3 blocks for her. We did not solve it that morning. I want to be honest about that because the movies would have us fall into each other across the counter, and they would be wrong. There was a child to think about, and 4 years of separate grief, and a forgery so total that we each had to watch the other slowly believe it had been done to them. Raina sent her security outside. We closed the cafe in the middle of a Tuesday, and we sat at a small table with Pippa between us building towers out of sugar cubes, and we laid the 2 letters side by side in our memories. Mine, in her hand, hers in mine, and we read them against each other. And the thing we had each been so sure of for 4 years made us sound like a cup set down too hard on a stone counter. The sound of something about to crack all the way through. I want to give you the weeks that followed quickly, because the claiming is the point, but it is not the whole of it. We did not rush. We could not. There was a small person who had only just gotten a second mother, and who could not be a battleground. Raina started bringing Pippa to the cafe in the mornings before the tower opened. And I learned my daughter the way you learn a coffee you have been waiting your whole life to taste, slowly, with my whole attention, terrified of getting a single note wrong. And Raina would sit at the end of my counter with her thumb on her watch and watch me learn our child. And the cold went off her a degree at a time. And neither of us said the thing under it yet. There is one morning from those weeks I keep folded up and carry with me. Pippa had fallen asleep in the big chair by the window with a hot chocolate going cold beside her. And Raina and I were behind the counter cleaning the machine in the quiet, our shoulders almost touching. The way you stand next to someone when your body remembers them before your mind has given it permission. And Raina said, without looking at me, in the voice she only used for the truest and most frightening things, I grieved you for 4 years. I want you to know that. And I put down the cloth, and I turned, and I looked at the woman I had been told threw me away for money, and I said the only thing that was true. I grieved you too, and a child I thought was ashes. We were both at the same funeral for 4 years, Raina, and she made that low, broken sound again, and her forehead came down against mine, and we stood there in my closed cafe with our daughter asleep in the window, not kissing, not anything, just breathing the same air for the first time in 4 years. And it was the most I have ever felt without a single thing happening. The wall did not come down all at once, but that was the morning the first brick came loose. And the whole time there was still a smiling woman in a tower who did not know that her 4-year-old lie had just walked into a cafe on its own 2 feet. Because that is the part I have not told you yet. The part that turns the reunion into a reckoning. Cornelia Voss did not know. For 3 weeks, she did not know that the barista she had buried was pulling espresso for her granddaughter every morning. And I knew, the way I know a lie in a cup, that the moment she found out she would move, quietly, exactly, the way she had moved 4 years ago. And that this time I was not a frightened girl alone in a clinic. This time, I had Nan's brass scoop in my apron, and 4 years of being right alone in the dark. And a woman I had loved who was slowly understanding what had been done to her. And a gray-eyed child who had chosen me across a dangerous street. I was not going to be erased a second time. I just had to wait for the room with the most witnesses in it. So, it turned out, did Cornelia. The room, when it came, was the Voss Foundation Gala. 300 of the city's most powerful people under the chandeliers of the tower's Great Hall. The night Raina was to be named the new chairman, and her mother was to step back into legend. I was not invited, of course. But Raina had asked me to come, in the quiet way she had relearned how to ask for things. And she had told me she meant to introduce Pippa to the board that night as her daughter, full stop, with no asterisk and no family obligation lie, and that she wanted me in the room when she did it. And Cornelia Voss, who heard everything, heard that too. And so, the most powerful woman in the city decided to get ahead of it the only way she knew, which was to destroy me first, in front of everyone, before her daughter could make me real. She moved an hour before midnight, in front of all of them, exactly the way I should have known she would. And 300 faces turned, and she turned with them, and she looked down the length of that great hall at me, a barista in a borrowed dress at the back of a room I had no business in. That woman, said Cornelia Voss, is a fortune hunter who abandoned a newborn for a settlement 4 years ago and has come crawling back to use my granddaughter to extort this family. I have the agreement she signed. And she lifted, into the chandelier light, a letter, my letter, the forged one. The one I had been handed beside a crib that was supposed to hold my dead child. I felt the whole room turn against me in a breath, the way a cafe goes quiet when something shatters in the back. 300 of the most powerful people in the city deciding, all at once, that the barista in the borrowed dress was exactly the fraud the chairman said she was. I have never been so alone in a crowded room. And I looked, the way you look for the one warm spot, up the length of the hall to the dais, to Raina, standing beside her mother with the whole weight of the family on her, the woman who had carried the matching forgery for 4 years. And I watched her face, and I watched her thumb go to her watch and press, white at the knuckle. And then I watched her do the thing I will love her for until I die. She took her hand off the watch, off it, and she stepped away from her mother, and she said, in the short, complete sentences I had loved at 24, loud enough for 300 people to hear, "Mother, bring me that letter. And have someone bring up the night nurse from the 7th of November 4 years ago." The hall did not breathe. Cornelia said, fast for the first time in 40 years, "Raina, this is grief talking. But she had made the one mistake she ever made, the same mistake the powerful always make. She had done it in the room with the most witnesses, and a room full of the city's sharpest people does not turn down the chance to watch a dynasty cut itself open. They wanted it. And I stepped forward out of the back of that hall into the turn light of 300 faces. And I took Nan's small brass scoop out of the bag at my hip and held it up so the chandeliers caught it, because it was the only true thing I owned. And I said, not loudly, just clearly enough to let the truth tell itself, I never signed that letter. I have never in my life cashed that check. What happened next happened fast, the way these things do once the first stone moves. A side door opened, because Raina's people had gone for the night nurse the moment Raina said the word, and an older woman in a plain coat came into that golden hall, looking terrified and resolved. And she was the administrator from 4 years ago, the one whose kind sympathy I had learned to hate, and she had been carrying her own piece of it all this time, the way frightened decent people do. She had kept a copy of the real record, the live birth, the healthy infant, the transfer of custody Cornelia Voss had ordered, the second letter she had been paid to plant. She had kept it for 4 years because she could not live with it and could not undo it. And when Raina's people knocked on her door that night, she had simply put on her coat. She stood in front of 300 people shaking, and she said the sentence that finished Cornelia Voss. The baby lived. I told the mother she died because I was paid to. The child upstairs is hers. God forgive me. I have tried many times to describe what happened in Cornelia Voss's face in that moment, and I have never managed it, because it was 40 years of never losing coming down at once. But I am not going to spend your time on her because she does not deserve the end of this story. The end of this story is Raina. The end of this story is the coldest alpha the city had ever made, stepping off that dais an hour before they would have named her chairman, crossing the whole length of that golden hall. 300 faces, 100 years of the family name, her own mother graying at the head of the room, and walking to a barista in a borrowed dress at the back. She did not stop until she was close enough to take my face in both her hands, the way she had 4 years ago in a closed cafe. And she said it in front of all of them, in the short, complete sentences I had loved when I was 24 and would love when I was old. A breath. Her name is Edie Calloway. She has never taken a cent from this family. And 4 years ago, you forged 2 letters in 2 hands and buried a living child's mother to keep me clean and controllable. She turned to the hall, to the whole watching city, and she did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. I am not going to be named chairman tonight. And then, last, quiet, only to me, with both her hands warm on my face and her thumb nowhere near that watch. I should have torn the building down looking for you instead of believing the woman who handed me the lie. Tell me it isn't too late. Cornelia Voss tried even then. She rose into the wreck of her own gala and did the thing the powerful always do last, the thing that had started all of it. She offered me money, a real sum, in front of everyone. Her voice barely cracked. The copper cup bought 10 times over, a fortune on top of it, to spare this family the scandal of a Café marriage. If I would only take it, the way she had always known a Calloway would, and disappear quietly one more time. And I understood that this was the oldest lie of all, the one the whole forgery had been built on. That my grandmother had been the kind of woman who could be bought, that I was. That the warm thing we make with our hands has a price. And I had Nan's brass scoop in my fist, and her voice in my chest, and, for the first time in 4 years, my daughter under the same roof, and her other mother's hands on my face. So I gave Cornelia Voss her answer in front of the city, and I gave it quiet, the way the truest things are said. You spent 4 years believing my grandmother's family could be bought, I said. She never could. I never have. I closed my hand around the scoop. I am not taking your money, Mrs. Voss. And then, because Nan raised me to read the truth and not to gloat over it, I said the only thing there was left to say, the thing she had folded into my fingers around a brass scoop before I could even read. A cup doesn't lie about whose hands warmed it. The city settles its own scores, and it settled this one the way it settles everything, slowly and in public and then in court. Cornelia Voss was not let out in handcuffs that night. Women like her never are, at first. But a forged custody record read aloud in front of 300 witnesses is a thing that cannot be unheard. And by the spring, the board had removed her, and the family lawyers were no longer hers. And a chairman who forges her own daughter's hand does not stay a legend for long. She lives, the last I heard, very quietly, in a smaller house than the one she ruled from, with no granddaughter to raise, and no daughter who will take her calls. I do not go there. I have a cafe to open every morning and a small gray-eyed person to walk to school. And I learned from my grandmother that the best revenge a warm thing ever takes is simply to go on being warm for the people it belongs to. I want to give you the part after, because the claim is not the end. The claim is only the moment the lie comes down, and what matters is what you build on the cleared ground. Raina and I did not go back to that one autumn. You cannot, and we did not try. We had 4 years of forged grief to take apart between us, brick by careful brick, the same slow way the lie had been built. Every cruel thing she had been told I'd done. Every cruel thing I'd been told she'd let happen, laid out on the counter in the lamplight, and read true and set down. It took a long time. It was not soft, but we did it the way you dial in a difficult coffee, patiently, by hand, before dawn, because the thing is worth getting right, and you will not let anyone else touch it. And somewhere in that long taking apart, the love her mother had forged 2 letters to murder quietly stood back up, older now, and ours. We live above the copper cup now, the 3 of us. Raina walked away from the tower. Not all of it. She is still her mother's daughter, and there were people who needed her to stay and fix what Cornelia broke. But she walked away from the part of it that had ever made her cold, and she comes downstairs in the mornings with Pippa on her hip and grinds the beans with Nan's brass scoop, while I pull the first shots. The coldest alpha the city ever made with espresso on her shirt, and our daughter teaching her how to froth milk badly. The city has stopped being afraid of her and started slowly being charmed, which I think unsettles her more than the fear ever did. She still has the one tell, her thumb finding the face of that watch when something moves in her she doesn't mean to show. I read it the way I read a cup. I always know what it means now. It means she still can't quite believe we're real. Neither, some mornings, can I. Pippa is the one who ends the story, the way she started it. She is 4 now, and she has her other mother's gray eyes, and her teachers tell me, my grandmother's way of going quiet and knowing things she shouldn't. And on Saturday mornings, she stands on a crate behind the counter, in an apron that drags on the floor, and she holds the brass scoop in both hands the way I once did. And she breathes in a cup and tells me with enormous seriousness that it is a good one or a sad one, and she is right more often than 4-year-olds have any business being. And every year, on the 7th of November, the 3 of us close the cafe and make a pot of the heirloom Ethiopian that started everything. And Raina stands behind me with her chin on my shoulder and her hands warm over mine, and Pippa breathes the steam and says, it's a good one. And it is. A cup doesn't lie about whose hands warmed it. Not the coffee, and not, in the end, the 3 of us. That is the whole of it. How a woman who pulls espresso in a 12-seat cafe ended up holding the secret heir of an empire and being claimed, in front of the people who'd buried her, by the coldest alpha in the city. My grandmother told me to be quiet enough to let the truth tell itself, and I did not understand her for years. And now I understand her completely, because the truest thing in my life ran 3 blocks through traffic to tell itself to me before I was ready to hear it. People will lie to your face your whole life, but the thing in the cup passed through somebody's hands to get to you, and the coffee cannot lie, and a child cannot lie about whose lap is home, and your only job, the only job any of us has in the end, is to be quiet enough to let the truth find you. And brave enough when it finally does to set down the grief you've carried and let yourself be claimed. Thank you for staying to the end of it. If this story kept you, tell me where you are watching from and subscribe. There is always another cup and another lie and another truth that will not stay buried, no matter how powerful the hands that tried.